Spring 1946. 10 months after the end of World War II, an explosion rocked the Pacific off the coast of Hawaii. America had just destroyed one of Japan's most advanced weapon systems.
Around the that's right. Enormous strategic options. Basically, anywhere in the world, this was a nuclear weapon system.
A system that defied conventional design and married the tactical advantages.
The overwhelming firepower of nuclear weapons against naval forces, demonstrated at Bikini Atoll in 1946, prompted the Navy to consider alternate basing schemes for aircraft. One possibility was making jet fighters amphibious, able to take off directly from the sea, a concept that resulted in the failed Convair XF-2YC Dart. Another, bolder idea, placing aircraft carriers underwater. Dubbed AN-1, the submarine aircraft carrier concept envisioned using a modified version of the Halibut-class guided missile submarine. The Halibut was larger than most boats. The reason was so it could accommodate the Regulus nuclear-tipped cruise missile. The Halibut-class subs carried 5 Regulus missiles, each of which was the size of a small jet fighter, in a hangar built into the hull. The missiles launched from a rail on the outside of the hull. AN-1 would have been a large submarine, nearly 500 feet long with a beam of 44 feet. It would have had an underwater speed of 16 knots, and thanks to a 15,000 horsepower shipboard nuclear power plant, could have cruised to any point on Earth. The submarine would have had 6 bow-mounted torpedo tubes and 2 rear-firing tubes. The sub's real firepower, however, was a squadron of 8 vertical takeoff fighter jets. Designed by Boeing, the Dagger-like jets would be raised up on launch platforms nose first and then boosted into the sky by 3 23,000-pound Wright C-105 turbojets. 2 of the engines would fall away to be recovered and reused later. The plane, which never left the design stage, had an estimated top speed of Mach 3. The cruise missiles being used at the time were about the same size as a jet fighter, so it makes sense that if a submarine could launch such a missile, then it could launch a jet fighter. The greater challenge was landing again. Boeing proposed tail-sitting jet fighters which take off and land vertically with the engine pointing downwards. This concept was validated in a series of experimental aircraft and found to be viable but also extremely difficult to control. The pilot has to land while sitting upside down and looking over their shoulder. Back in the 1950s, the whole U.S. military was pivoting toward atomic war, and it was in a nuclear conflict the AN-1 would have been most useful. The AN-1s wouldn't have been able to send off a useful number of fighter jets for a convention war. But the sub could have surfaced near the Soviet Union or China to launch nuclear-armed fighters from an unexpected direction. AN-1 was a concept ahead of its time. Today, the increase of high-tech threats against aircraft carriers, including hypersonic weapons and anti-ship ballistic missiles, could force them to adapt and go underwater, just like the Navy was considering 60 years ago. Unmanned aerial vehicles, launched and recovered from submarines, could someday perform many of the same missions performed by carrier aircraft. The United States already builds drones and submarines far larger than AN-1, and it may be just a matter of time before it combines the two into a stealthy and lethal package.